Good morning, all, and welcome to Brick by Brick. And we will start, I think, and a couple of people may join us in the next couple of minutes. My name is Ali Ahmed. I'm the chair of Race on the Agenda, and I wanted first to thank you for taking the time to join us today. Really appreciate that you took time. And this is really the start of a new project in the first phase, a planning phase, and focusing on housing and really kind of addressing systemic racism within housing. In a minute, I'll introduce the rest of the day and the running order, but I just wanted to take a few words first to thank the team for the valiant effort and our new incoming CEO who just literally started at 9 o'clock this morning and throwing him in the deep. For us, this is a really, really crucial area because it's not about provision of just housing, but it's the need and then human right, basic need of homes. And I say homes because actually homes are not just about somewhere where you live, but much more than that. We have seen in recent years the communities, working class communities and Black and racialized communities in particular, and those at the very margin of society and suffering from bad housing conditions and not just living in bad temporary accommodation, but actually, on occasion, such as the young boy Awab dying of those conditions. For us, it's an issue to be very, very concerned of, and it's an issue that we need to address collectively and in collaboration with our communities, centering the lived experience of our communities through an intersectional lens. And all of our work, including this one, is always in collaboration with our communities. So again, thank you very much for joining us on this webinar. And I hope that you will all be able to contribute to this body of work as it develops. As I said, this is just a planning year, and the idea is for this year for everybody to kind of co-produce a longer term program that addresses this issue. In terms of speakers today, and our new CEO will kind of set the scene and pass over to him in a minute. We have a guest speaker, Paris Williams, who's a community organizer in this space, and who will share with us her insights and work and raising alarm of racism within the housing sector. We'll have a quick break and to kind of just have a comfort break, and then we'll explore community solutions, what community solutions might look like. And we really want to hear some update from Michaela, but we want to hear from you as well. So we'll give you space later on. And in terms of housekeeping, and the webinar is recorded, and so if you don't want to appear, and it's fine to have your camera off, but we'll really encourage you to contribute as much as possible. And if there's anybody who's triggered and just wanting space, and our colleague Safer Valley, who's on the call, and has a space for you in a breakout room. And Safer, could you put your email or how to contact you on the chat, please? I just wanted to thank you again and just reassure you that everything you tell us today and your priorities will be incorporated into the wider program. There will be a poll later on, and which the team will talk you through and through a Slido within this space that we're all in. And as I said, we have with us today Matthew Johnson. And Matthew brings with him expertise in policy, research, and a deep understanding of the volunteer sector. And he's very well known within the sector and as an exceptional leader, and who inspires his teams and excels and fosters in innovation, empowering organizations to thrive in dynamic environment. And I'm going to hand over to him, but as I said, he just literally started an hour ago, so be gentle on him. Matthew, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, it's a privilege to to join you all today to discuss this really important issue. As Ali said, I've been in post for 1 hour and 7 minutes so far, and so I've managed to get on the system, thankfully, and be with you all today. But I did want to just say a few words ahead of the start of this webinar. And it is interesting, and it is that the first issue that I'm able to speak on externally is the issue of housing. And this is, if anything, does articulate the divide within our society, and the racialized divide within our society. It is the state of the housing crisis within this country that we have today. And it is persistent, it is severe, and it is, as I say, racialized at the same time too. And it is a situation that does require a coordinated and collective effort to overcome. And as Race on the Agenda, we really do want to partner with you. We do really want to not operate in silos, but recognizing that this is such a structural and systemic issue that it requires us all to put our minds, to put our hearts, to put our ideas, and to put all together to address this issue. We are really dealing with strong and inhumane practices whereby people are being moved from their locations. Recent research showed that people are being moved from their locations within 24 hours to places such as in the northeast, with very little concern for their safety and we have seen sort of last year with the far right riots how the housing crisis and the implications of the housing crisis has left people very much in danger too. So yeah, I know it's really good to be with you, and I'm looking forward to the Michaela's put together and the team have put together a fantastic webinar for you all today, and look forward to working with you all in the future on this important issue too. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Matt, for your words of encouragement for the sector, for the, that call to action for us to come together collectively to partner to tackle this persistent issue, as you describe, that the housing crisis is racialized. And it's on that note that, really excited and delighted to welcome Paris Williams as our guest speaker today. You've heard from Ali how Paris has been raising the alarm on housing injustice, and it doesn't go there. I mean, I want to do justice in introducing Paris. Paris by day is a policy and public affairs professional specializing in all things criminal justice, but by evenings, weekends and holidays is a housing community organizer fighting to change the deeply corrupt housing system. Paris has sounded the alarm on numerous occasions with issues within the housing sector, such as racism, whilst trying to rent privately, and has experienced racism and accessing support from, local council, and more recently, her efforts in fighting leaseholders' injustices. Paris has featured in Sky News documentaries, ITV pieces, and sits on the New Economics Foundation regranting panel, which aims to redistribute monies to smaller grassroots organisations who are fighting housing justice on the front line. I trust that you will give Paris a warm welcome as she takes the stage to put racism in housing under the spotlight. Over to you, Paris.
Hi, good morning. So yeah, housing to me is the bedrock of everything. I personally grew up in safe and secure social housing to the point that when I was 18 of my university, I fully thought my mum owned the house. I didn't think it was council housing. I was like, wait, what, you pay rent? And my mum was like, yeah, I don't own the house. And that's because I grew up with a safe and secure home, whereas I had school peers that every time I would go to tea at their houses, it was like an adventure because they had a different bedroom, it was different coloured walls. And that really hit home to me from a young age, just how our experiences of housing differ so much. In the borough of Newham, currently there's 600 households that present as homeless every month. Newham is also the borough where a lot of gentrifications happen. Think Hackney, how it's become hip, trendy, cool. And I first became engaged in the housing struggle during university. And that's what really sparked a passion and interest into fighting some of the injustices that I faced as a student. And currently, at present, 1 in 3 Black people who have experienced homelessness have also faced racial discrimination from a landlord, 6 times more than the general population of those who have struggled for shelter. 85% of those who are from minority ethnic backgrounds have urged the public inquiry into a landlord body to carry out work to see what's happening. Housing is not a commodity, it's a basic human right. But for far too long in the UK, housing has been used as a vehicle to accumulate more wealth. As with all capitalism, race is inherent to the system running. Racial capitalism thrives off the back of housing injustice. It's a crisis and it cannot go unnoticed any longer. As a student, I experienced lots of bad housing and I was forever dismissed as that annoying Black girl. In 2021, I began working in the WARG sector, which is the violence against women and girls sector. And I became quite aware there that women were being displaced, so they'd maybe feared domestic abuse situation, and they were being displaced to different communities where they couldn't access their local African and Caribbean shop. And then that caused further problems with accessing help from social services because they were facing problems of being told, well, why don't you have a lot in the fridge today? And it was because they had been displaced so far away from local supermarkets that it was quite a struggle to get there. And that's where I began connecting my story with other women that I worked with. And I began summarizing some reports about how, women are trapped in abusive relationships purely because they cannot access the private rental market and they're told, good luck waiting on the social housing, it's a 10-year wait. And I thought this cannot be right. And at the same time, I was experiencing violence against myself as a woman in my home and because I was living in a rented HMO. I turned to multiple agencies from the police to the council and they simply dismissed me and said, under the eyes of the UK law, landlords just have more rights than you. And that began to just sit not very well with me. I'm a person that if I see injustice, I'm going to fight. And it doesn't matter how busy I am, I take the time to engage and embrace different movements. And then I thought, okay, I can't live here anymore. I'm facing gender violence from male flatmates. I need to get out of here. So I took back to Spare Room and I took back to all the Facebook groups like Gals Who Rent or the trendy hip mates place groups. And I began searching for new accommodation. But here lies the problem that I encountered. Landlords wouldn't respond to Spare Room. In Facebook groups, I was frequently asked about my degree, my job, even if I went to a Red Book University, which is like the Russell Group universities. That's if they acknowledged me. Countless messages went unnoticed. My posts that I posted in these groups frequently received 0 likes, but the slim blue-eyed girl wearing Lululemons and a little track top and a little running shoes, they got thousands of likes. And that was quite crushing at the time because I just wanted to live in a safe and secure home, but no one wanted to invite me to these rooms that they had available. Her options were endless, mine were slim. And comments just seemed to grow and grow while my comments just didn't appear. At the same time, when I finally did break through and a landlord did want to potentially rent a room to me, I'd get through the application, the landlord would then inspect my passport, like they were trying to see if a Louis Vuitton bag was real or fake. My passport has been scrutinised under multiple different lights. Day lamps, daylight, the big room light. Any light, that passport has been inspected through every inch of its life, just to question if I'd faked a passport or not. Then I'd get the comments of, you can't be British. Why can't I be British? Well, but you just can't be British. And they would never ever just say, it's because you're Black. And that really, I think, paints a picture of the microaggressions that I face, even down to what food do I cook. Is it smelly food that you cook? It was just exhausting whilst living within a home that was unsafe, working on heavy subjects, trying to find a home was becoming like a full-time job. And I thought, I've had enough. So I sounded the alarm through TikToks and just media presence. And then I thought, hang on, I need to like prove a point here, because I'm saying to the media this is happening, but they're not believing that there's a problem with Spare Room. So I decided to set up a separate account on Spare Room. Her name, Tilly Smith, blonde hair, blue-eyed, a model like enough to rival Kate Moss or Cindy Crawford. I would send the same message from my own account and tweak the name or age from Tilly's account. The fake account got triple the responses, whereas me, just automatic replies. My own experiences inspired Generation Rent to conduct research, and they found similar statistics that Black people were less likely to be responded to than white people in Spare Room. The impact of systemic racism cannot be underestimated in housing. The misogyny I have faced and many other Black and racialized people face in advocating for our rights is dehumanizing and like a full-time job. The situation in my house share from 2021 to 2024 continued to get progressively worse. Flatmates would often be racist to me, on top of experience living with damp and mould, and the council just told me we can't do anything. I even had to trace who owned my property, and it turned out that I was living in a situation called rent to rent, which basically meant that my landlord was renting from someone else. The council didn't do that work, I did that work. And that's kind of the lens that I think Black and racialised people are going to sort of get answers, and we shouldn't have to go to them lengths. But the pivotal moment was in 2022. I was seeing a therapist due to work stress. She said to me, "You're not stressed because of work. You're stressed because you're burnt out due to your housing situation." She was like, "Have you ever heard of the Maslow hierarchy of needs?" And I was like, "I don't know psychology. That's not my area." And she said, "Your housing is one of the pivotal like stumbling blocks to thrive in life. Your housing needs are just not being met. Therefore, you're operating from survival mode." And I suppose that rang true, because I couldn't really make long-term decisions. I was thinking, is that safe? I couldn't go out with friends at night because I was thinking, well, all my flatmates get home at 5. I need to be home at this time. Oh dear, if I get home a second later, I might face abuse from the housemate. I just couldn't live life. It was very much living in fight or flight mode. And I was very burnt out. And from that, I thought, I've got to get to grips with this. I've got to find a way. And I started doing more media appearances. But then I started to save. I finally got a better paying job, and I started to save money. Fast forward to 2025, and I can now say, through hard work, I'm now a homeowner. But not everyone's as lucky as me. No one should have to buy a home to have safe and secure accommodation. And now I live in a lovely 2-bed ex-council, which annoys me even more because it should be a council flat still. Unfortunately, I'm now part of the asset class and I own this property. But with that has come a sense of relief. I've never slept as good as I sleep, despite renovations. I sleep like a baby. I can rest, I can sleep, I can have peace. And I have a spring in my step. I turn up to work. I want to work. I'm happy with people. I'm living life. And my life has just started to begin. And I'm 26. My life should have begun a long time ago, but I'm beginning life at 26. And for so many other people, they don't get that chance to have a story like me. And that's what I'm trying to correct, is how can we move forward, have a better housing system, one where housing isn't a commodity and it's just seen as a basic human right. Thank you for listening.
Wow, Paris, thank you so much. I have nothing but admiration and extend a massive solidarity salute to you in what you have overcome, what you are doing now in raising the alarm, sharing your lived experience to disrupt the racialized divide that exists within our housing crisis. There is so much in what you described there that really links to those social determinants of health, and how your housing experience intersects with your lived experience of racism and impacting your physical, emotional, mental well-being, and that physiological sense of safety, and just the things that you were also kind of navigating alongside looking for secure housing. It shouldn't happen. As you say, housing is a basic right, it's not a commodity. And we really thank you for sharing your lived experience and for championing what you have gone through to bring about change. And you know, we are so delighted to hear that you now have the peace at night to sleep. Yes, as you say, it shouldn't be the case, and it just kind of really reaffirms, you know, as we've heard from our chair and our CEO, you know, how the housing crisis persists and why this is a priority for us. It's at this point that I really want to invite questions from our attendees. You know, you can, if you want, raise your hand. You can, put it in the chat. I'm just going to go over to our Q&A and see if we've got any questions there. Okay, right, okay. Thank you, John, for alerting us that you're having an issue using the chat function there. We will definitely have a look at that in the break. In the meantime, if there's anything that you do want to share or comment on, then, you know, please use the Q&A space to do that whilst we look into that. I'm just going to have a look to see if anyone's got their hands up, because there's 4 different screens here. If anyone does have a question for Paris, just going to go back into the chat as well. Just got somebody coming in. Serena, please unmute and come on into the conversation.
Hi, yeah, thank you, Paris, for sharing your stories. Great to hear, obviously, experiencing all that kind of, racism, misogynoir specifically. It's obviously very impactful on your own, like, mental health as well. So I kind of had a question on what kind of tips or recommendations would you give to people who are going through similar things? Because a lot of people face like powerlessness in their situations, and they feel like they don't have the capacity to actually do anything about their housing. So kind of like, what would you suggest, or what did you do when you were kind of feeling like hard done by, or kind of feeling like you wanted to give up? Like, what were your tips, basically?
Yeah, I think maybe, in case you can't tell, I'm a northerner. I live in London and I class myself as an adopted Londoner. But I grew up north, where my first words probably after that mum and dad were Margaret Thatcher, the milk Thatcher. So I grew up hearing about like the history of Thatcher and how you stick together as a community. And that was something that was instilled in me from like a young age, is that you don't overcome something with one individual. You come together as a group and you fight the system together. And I found community, which can be really hard because a lot of the housing spaces are very white. Even like your tenant unions tend to be very white led, and it can be quite alienating to go into them spaces. But I did find good community in the housing sector, and just being part of like tenant unions. And then there's a group called Housing for People of Colour. There were some brilliant people in there that really like held my hand throughout the whole thing, and it was just having good friends that could understand. And I've always been fortunate to have employers that housing comes up in Vogue all the time, comes up in criminal justice theory all the time. So I've always been around people that can get it to some degree. But it's hard, it's tiring, and I think at the ultimate point is sometimes you do have to know that media story. I can't do it. Like it's being able to say no to a lot of things. I do say no to an awful lot of media. And my tip is just to surround yourself with people that love you and like hear you. Don't if you go into a space and you're not loved, don't go there, because it only ends in tears. And obviously this isn't applicable to everyone because not everyone earns a lot, but I do have an expensive gym membership, which I'm not advocating for because gym memberships are expensive, but just having a space where I could forget about housing. And that, so for some people that might be, you know, access to a library. Mine, I just chose a gym that had a sauna and everything else, and that really just gave me a space to unwind. And at the end of the day, if I didn't want to shower at home, I could shower at the gym, and it gave me space just to be me, because for so long, even in meetings now, I mean, it stopped since I've become a homeowner, but people say, "How are you?" and then how's the housing situation? That's how like people knew me, is the girl that has bad housing. So I just sometimes in the spaces where was just Paris that like the gym or Paris that like to swim. But it is hard in a world where capitalism has made everything so individualized and people don't want to stick together and fight. People are very fragmented, and we've got politicians right now saying to us, "Oh, just fight it alone. Don't join a union." We've got bills going through Parliament or that have gone through Parliament that have eroded trade unionism, and that is sad. And I think we have to stick together. There's no other way to fight it other than sticking together and collectivizing.
Absolutely. And there's a call to action there, Paris, in what you've said. Community is about being in a space that, you are seen and you are loved, and being boundaried and having space for self-care. That's something that I've really kind of heard in what you were saying there. And I'm just thinking from, you shared a lot at the beginning, and how you've gone through your years, where you are now. Like, what do solutions look like, I guess, from your perspective, knowing what you know now, being a homeowner, kind of being out of that? But what does that mean? Like, what does that look like for others, would you say, that are still in this struggle? What might solutions look like?
I didn't want to be a homeowner. I don't like being a homeowner. I've got builders in right now that it's expensive. I'd prefer to be a tenant. I think ultimately we can't solve this crisis without more council housing. Labour have made commitments to build, which is brilliant, but we need build of council housing, not private developers that are building homes that people just simply cannot afford. I used to live in Colindale, and tower blocks are just going up and they're just sat empty. You've just got flats that are unoccupied because of what? 365,000? No one has the means to pay that. The only way you solve this crisis is by building social housing, specifically council housing, that is affordable. And we need to stop with this affordable housing, because what is affordable? Because when you look at these schemes, it will then say in the very small print at the bottom, can only apply if you earn over £40,000 for an affordable flat in, I don't know, say Birmingham. And you just think, that's higher than the average wage. The average wage is what, 35,000? Like, how is that affordable? We've got a crisis in the public sector whereby we can't really employ people because their wages don't match housing. If we don't solve the housing crisis in Britain, society is going to go even further backwards. We're going to have more wealth inequality, because housing is the foundation of everything. It's the foundation of the economy. It's the foundation of school standards. I see it as a school governor. Kids cannot concentrate in school because they're thinking, well, when we get home tonight, we're going to be evicted. There's so much to it that if Labour truly have an ambition for this economy to thrive, for people to get wealthier, you fix housing first, and you fix housing by building council housing.
Amen. We've heard it here, as Paris said. And as you say, it's also addressing that racialized element as well within that, and the housing allocations. There's so much work to be done, but we are not deterred. We are encouraged. We are here in this space. I know there's lots of other organisations working on this, and that's where that coordinated action is so important in galvanising this movement brick by brick. And I'm just going to put it out there again, a call for questions if there are any other questions or reflections even on what you've heard so far. Come on in, Ali.
Just a quick reflection on a couple of things both Paris and Serena said. Serena, on what do you do? Really, I would encourage, wherever possible, connecting with agencies that support people around housing. There are a number of community housing that provide legal support and challenge landlords, and happy to connect you with some of them if you're having a live issue at the moment. And the other bit is really what housing providers tend to recently respond to is powerful stories that are shared through media, through online. So wherever possible, I would really encourage those stories, the lived experience, to how people are put in these horrible conditions, and it kind of makes agencies react very, very quickly, particularly if there's vulnerable people in those conditions. And there are a number of recent cases in Walthamstow, for example, where Bangladeshi young women with 3 children and lived in the most appalling conditions, but they were moved straight away as soon as the Sky News got into this. On the issue, what Paris was talking about is really puts lots of smiles in my mind, because actually housing is not just traumatizing people and harming people's physical health and mental well-being, but is actually impacting wider society, both in increasing the wealth inequality, but harming people means actually those people are not productive in society and contributing. We keep hearing the government talking about productivity, but actually, if a significant portion of the working population, it's not well for various reasons, and some of those are directly related to poverty, race inequality, and other inequalities. Well, actually, that's an issue for society that goes beyond the harm done to the individual, their communities, and families. So really, I'm encouraged by those comments. So thank you very much for bringing in the wealth and how actually health is central for this and the intersection of these policy areas.
Thank you, Ali. I'm just going to clarify, Jamila, is there a question that you have for us? If you feel comfortable to unmute, or hello, Safer, come on in.
Hello. Yeah, sorry. There's a question in the chat from Carol. What is rent for rent?
I've just answered it, but essentially, rent for rent is where, like, say, Michaela is my landlord, but then Michaela rents the property that I live on off Matthew, for example. So it's like a system where when people don't have the means or wealth to buy a property, they will rent a property, they make a deal with another landlord, and then they rent it out. Typically, it's a HMO, which is a house of multiple occupancy. That's typically a room share, and that's, again, they do bills included, but again, it's very opaque. You don't actually know how much the bills are. There's a lot of profit seeking in all these new sort of terms that are coming around. A big proponent of that on TikTok is someone called Samuel Leeds. He's always bragging and boasting about how young people can get rich quick from rent to rent, and you don't need to have a 9-to-5 job, just do rent to rent. And actually, when you look at it, there's not a lot of laws in place that protects it, because that's something that I found with the council is they didn't know who to hold accountable. Do you hold the person I pay rent to, or the person my landlord paid rent to? The new Renters' Rights Bill is seeking to tackle that. They have put a small amendment in there to sort of put onus on both landlords, because, well, you're both a landlord.
That's really helpful context there. Thank you so much, Paris. Carol, would you like to come in?
It was only just to say, Paris, no, you've answered the question beautifully, because I was just interested in whether you thought that the additional layer of management, the lived experience of that as a tenant, made your life even more insecure. And you just said, essentially, yes, it does. So thank you for that.
It definitely does, because you don't know who you're renting from. And, because of what I do, I knew that I could go in the land registry, but I had a friend that didn't even know she was in a rent to rent. And you just think, and then when you go on the land registry, it's owned by a company. So then I had to go look at who owned the company. Then that company was owned by another company. So I had to do real investigative journalism to just find out who owned the property. And you just think people don't have that time. If you're a doctor, you don't have the time to spend on an evening thinking who owns this property. It just shouldn't be like that. But property in this country and renting has become so layered and so bureaucratic, you cannot access help.
Do you get the sense that that's purposely done?
I think it's been done a lot by young people who maybe feel that the boomer generation, they've been able to accumulate a lot of wealth. So they're thinking, well, my 9 to 5 doesn't pay me what my parents got paid. How do I accumulate that same level of wealth to have a decent living standard? I can't own the property, but I can make money from property. I see a lot of the time on TikTok of people selling courses of how to do it. Even just the nature of being a landlord has become something you can make money from, or teaching other people to be a landlord. The whole housing system is just, how do we get money from people?
Yeah.
Thank you for your question, Carol, and Paris for answering that. Atheon, I can see that you've got your hand up as well. Would you like to come in?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
First of all, thank you very much, Paris. I think it's been really inspirational to hear you speaking. I had a question which is kind of connected to what was just being discussed, in terms of, I think for a lot of young people who have been denied kind of social mobility by an increasingly unequal society, property has become the kind of last means as a way of accumulating wealth. But I think that kind of creates a difficulty in building an effective kind of social coalition to push for major legislative changes around the construction of housing, or the gentrification that's happening in inner city communities, or the kind of myriad of things we've spoken about. In terms of your experience as a housing community organizer, how do you think we can especially get young people to look beyond property as a means of accumulating wealth, and to start to think about their role in kind of activism around tackling housing issues?
I think it starts with, I'm the perfect person at work. When I see young people, they start at work and they go, oh, I'm not joining the union. And I say, no, you will join the union, and I'll see you on Friday to make sure that you've signed up, and I want to see notification you've signed up, because we're losing every opportunity to build community, every opportunity to come together. We're being told, don't do that. That's why the train workers are lazy, because they're part of unions. No, the train workers are paid so well because they're part of a union, because collective bargaining and collective action actually leads to change, because one person alone can't affect the system. You have to come together. And I think that's what we have to do with young people. We have to, it's annoying to educate, but the TikToks are filled with just how do you make money. And it's, that's a wider problem. I think everything's interlinked. You can't speak about housing without speaking about the climate crisis. Everything's so interwoven that it is, when you have an opportunity with a young person, taking that time to say, well, you don't get paid as well because of capitalism, which causes this problem, which causes the housing injustice, is taking that minute with young people to speak to them and actually educate them, because a lot of them don't know the history. A lot of them, as particularly young Gen Zs, they don't know about Margaret Thatcher and what she did. And I think we're losing that out of passing stories on. We're just very quick to be on phones and not actually listen to our elders who have been involved in mining strikes and the strikes of like Notting Hill and the race riots. But we're losing that out of passing down stories, and that's a key sort of tool to educate young people, because they're just so filled with TikTok and social media.
Thank you. And Matthew? We've got no sound, Matt. I know, you're not muted either. Okay, Matt's gonna try and fix the issue and rejoin us.
He looks muted to me.
He wasn't when he was speaking before.
Now he's not muted. So, yeah.
We've still got no sound. Okay, no problem. Well, I think you've really stirred up a really interesting debate to be continued and to be unpacked after our 5-minute break, Paris. I think, there's a lot of food for thought there. I thank everybody for their questions. We're going to have a quick 5-minute comfort break. And yes, we will be back at 10:46 if you will join us after the break. Hello, and we are back. I hope that you are doing well, and yes, as we go into the next section of our webinar, I'm going to kick off with a poll. I think as we really heard there from Paris in her spotlight session, the importance of self-care. And, you know, we're talking about something that is very emotive, very racialized and very real for some of us on the call. And I think that it's important that we center joy as we go into our next activity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch our poll, and just encourage you to have a few minutes to think about what one thing brings you joy. So just going to pop that into the chat. So yes, have a minute to have a little think. Thank you for those who, you know, put your answers in already. I know that somebody else has just joined us, so thank you for making time to come along to the webinar. It is being recorded, so you will be able to catch up on our earlier sessions. Right now, we're doing a poll to just center joy, to just hold on to things that, yeah, bring us a bit of happiness. It's really important we keep our pockets full in the times that we are living in. So yeah, I'll just give another minute for those who may not have had chance to. And then we can kind of just see what the themes are that's coming out of the poll. Great. Okay, so I think we've more or less got you know, we've got 20 responses, which is fantastic. Just, yeah, at face value, what I can really see there that family and connection with children and grandchildren and friends and belonging to a community is something that brings us joy. Being able to collaborate in a space with like-minded people who perhaps might be smiling also brings us joy. There's something sensory in eating chocolate and cooking that also brings us joy. There's something there in terms of dancing and movement and music that again is kind of like food for the soul. It's really important that we keep hold of these as we go to the next activity where we're going to be thinking about and unpacking, you know, racism in housing. So I thank you all for sharing those responses with us. I'm just going to move on to the next part of our activity. I'm also navigating tech, which, as you can see, I will not be defeated by that. We've got a little message about there's something technical going on with Teams and it's not responding. Right, let me see if I can just come on to something else to just see if I upload something else. Right. Right, I'm going to call in our tech guru, Safer. Have you got any advice for how to close down the poll? Because it's just...
via the results, maybe. Instant poll.
Right, it's moved. It's gone. See, tech guru on hand. It's all sorted. It's all remedied. Thank you so much, Safer. So, in this part of the activity, we're going to be looking at, you know, how systemic racism, you know, impacts housing and what we can do to change it. You know, as you heard at the beginning, you know, we give a trigger warning. We encourage you to share what you feel comfortable to, encourage you to keep your pocket filled with joy and to look after yourself during this activity. Just a quick reminder that, you know, there is a breakout space if it's needed. And it's on that note that I will activate our Slido. So we've got 3 questions. 3 questions. Again, it's all anonymous. Answer what you feel comfortable to. In the chat now, you should receive an invitation to go to the Slido question. And the first question is, how does being from a Black global majority background impact access to secure housing? So if anybody's having any difficulty seeing that in the chat, please kind of let me know, and I can share a separate link. Okay, thank you. I can see that we've got some participants who have managed to put some answers in, so that's great. Thank you so much. We'll just give you a couple more minutes to find your way. Hello, yes, sure.
I've got learning difficulties, so I may need you to help me understand. What does Black global majority mean?
That's a great question, Jamila. We use that here at ROTA to describe community members who are from, you know, racialized communities, to not just, you know, some people might use the word BAME. So yeah, we prefer to use the global majority because we're minoritized in the UK, but we know elsewhere there's much more of us. Does that help make a bit more sense?
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your question. So let's just have a look at how our votes are going in Slido. I can see that there's 5 people typing at the moment, which is very exciting to see what kind of responses are going to come through. Just going to admit Carol back in to join us. Some really interesting responses here. I really thank you for taking the time to share your insights with us, help us build a picture of what is going on. You know, we know research tells us one thing. It doesn't always, you know, tell us or give us the full picture. So yeah, thank you for your insights. Okay, so let's just go in and see what we've got to start sharing some insights here. So we can see that the impact of racism is more likely to have, you're more likely to have, a precarious job. You're more likely to be in social housing, which is not of a decent standard, and to be in homes where there's damp and mold. We're also hearing that it impacts across all areas in accessing housing, in private rented, in social housing and home ownership. We have some insight from lived experience where a housing issue meant that they were placed somewhere totally unsuitable, and really had to challenge that and appeal it to address the situation. We're also hearing how Black and global majority community members are hugely disadvantaged in both housing and homelessness, and that there are higher rates of homelessness for longer periods of time, including temporary accommodation. And we know that research shows this irrespective of your migration status, and it just really highlights the impact of racism. We've also seen a theme here around housing providers. They see race and ethnicity, not the person. That really kind of connects the dots with the themes and the conversations that are coming out. We're also hearing from, again, lived experience, that securing stable housing often feels like navigating an extra layer. There are, extra barriers, and landlords suddenly changing their minds, and that it wasn't really about, finances. There's a bias there. And it's again kind of going back historically, that persistent issue that we heard Matt talk about this morning, and the impact of that leading to not being able to afford housing. We're hearing about being denied access. Paris really illuminated that when she unpacked her lived experience this morning under the spotlight. We're seeing threads of discrimination and just the layer upon layer of disadvantage, caused and rooted in being from a racialized community, really having to go up against extra hurdles and barriers when housing is like we've heard the foundation for everything. And so these insights are really powerful and really important as we come to understand what solutions might look like. And I'm just going to check to see how we're getting on, if anybody else is writing, because there are a couple of other questions that kind of build in upon this. I'll just add one more reflection from research. Being treated with disrespect and prejudice and not being given the time to express and discuss, what's being concerned, especially, coming from the perspective of the child that, may have additional needs, and being placed in, unsuitable accommodation. And I mean, the implications of that are enormous, and there's so much to unpack there. Again, these insights just give us a perspective that really helps us in shaping the program and the works that we are yet to do. I'm going to activate now the next question, and this question will be in the chat to do as you just have to go and place your vote in Slido. The question is, what do you believe are the key causes of housing insecurity for Black and global majority communities in London? And to just say, you may be on the call from outside of London, and that's absolutely okay. Feel free to share your thoughts and perspectives relating to where you are, where you're based. So this will populate as a word cloud for us. So it'd be really interesting to see what themes are coming out from this answer. I can see there's quite a few typing. We've got a couple of responses. Just give it again a few more minutes and we can start to kind of share what some of these themes look like. Okay. So some of the main themes that Slido's kind of picked out of the answers so far relates to discrimination, precarious housing, systemic and institutional racism. Some of the other themes that we're getting relate to employment, relate to precarious jobs, the market, ownership, perhaps that relates to wealth, and as we've heard, you know, in conversation, asset accumulation, and social mobility. Hearing about tenure, so the types of, you know, accommodation that's being offered and the length of time that perhaps that's being given. We've got a comment from Eleanor, who is part of our policy and research team here at ROTA, and talks about a high percentage of people from Black and global majority communities will pay unaffordable housing costs than people from white communities in London, and that really, you know, highlights some of the findings and the themes that we're seeing, Eleanor. So thank you for sharing that insight with us. So we've got terrible is a word that has emerged there, and just want to give people space, I would say, in you know, these themes that are coming out. Is there anybody that wants to elaborate on you know, some of the key causes of housing insecurity? You're welcome to put your hand up or to unmute and to kind of just elaborate a little bit. No pressure, no pressure, no pressure. I want people to feel comfortable in this space, but also want it to be an interactive space as well. Okay, so I'm going to bring up our last question now. So let me just activate that in the chat. So our last question is, again, thinking about a community and coordinated response, that collective action. How can we come together to address housing insecurity for Black and global majority communities in London? So thank you for those that are typing your responses. So Paris is evoking us to support charities who are fighting for change, to show up for demos and protests, to join a local tenants union, and to ensure your family and friends and work colleagues also join. There's more of us than them when we come together. We're also hearing about an increased confidence in knowing your housing rights and how to advocate for this. And thank you for this comment. That certainly fits into the work that ROTA plans to do as part of a long-term program of work and capacity building around housing. We are hearing about reducing knife crime. There are also calls to call it out through identifying and working with allies, supportive local authorities, charities and unions, as well as fantastic community groups. So again, there's a theme here of really about pooling resources together, connecting the dots, to be louder together, to leverage that power, collective power, to influence change. We're also hearing about keeping up the pressure for a massive increase in social rented homes. We heard from Paris how more council housing is the solution to have more housing that is affordable. We're also hearing how it's important to support community-led initiatives that are empowering Black and global majority communities to have more control. We're also hearing about addressing housing insecurity through community-led research and co-design solutions, elevating the voices of those that have been most impacted, and using that as a vehicle to really drive change. It's also about it being a sustainable approach that's obviously rooted in the community, serving the community. And I would say that really resonates with this project in particular, and our principle at ROTA, nothing about us without us. So thank you for that response. Again, coordination, what are the barriers and what might the trigger points be? And increasing that community advocacy, renters knowing their rights, and this is something that's a message, a clear takeaway that Paris has said, knowing your rights and being informed and being connected with sources of knowledge that can strengthen that, to give you the insights that you can really leverage. And this kind of connects with another response, that this is about doing this work within schools and supporting the community to know their rights. And ultimately, by collectively changing the narrative around housing and what it should be, that shift from it as a commodity, but this is a basic human right. There can be that influence and change about what housing is, and to kind of have that shift at a policy level, because ultimately that is what we are seeking. We are seeking systemic change. These insights are so powerful. So I'm here narrating, if you like, I'm giving a commentary, but so impactful for how again we shape this piece of work with you. I really thank you for your contributions. We're one last takeaway before we kind of move on to hear a little bit about the project, to kind of unpack that. We've got a recommendation around financial literacy, and it's also interconnected. These insights will be collated. We will be looking to build those in. There's also a feedback form, so it'd be interesting to get your insights, but also to stay connected for further conversation, because it doesn't just end here now with the end of our Slido question. So I'm just going to introduce now, and thank you for those responses. But yeah, we're going to move on to kind of look at what it is we are doing. So what are we doing? And I'm going to give you like a really high level overview of our Brick by Brick project. And you would have heard this at the beginning, you know, we are looking to really hold local authorities to account in centering the voices of those who have been most affected by racial housing injustices. And one of the ways that we aim to do this is through a community-led research project. And it's founded on cultural consciousness to expose those inequities, to be able to challenge those discriminatory practice, so that we can really push for a more fairer and just Britain. We have funding for the next 12 months, but this piece of work is part of a larger project designed to co-create a capacity building program rooted in community-led research to influence policy and practice. And housing is one of ROTA's strategic policy priorities. And this project will sit alongside our flagship RCRP, which is ROTA's Community Research Partnership, which is funded by Propel, and it's led by our amazing team, Taranjit and Kulvinder. And I'd like to give a big shout out to you both for the work that you have done. The next thematic area they will be exploring will be housing and health and well-being. And, you know, as we've heard today, these are themes that are, you know, interconnected and intersect. There's a really key theme that's coming across. You know, we're hearing about community, we're hearing about coordinated action, and it makes me think of, you know, the great works of Audre Lorde, who reminds us without community there is no liberation. And it feels appropriate on that note to introduce our call to action. So we are here to call on all of the actors within the housing system to join our movement. The first brick in laying the foundations for racial justice in housing is the formation of our advisory group. And as I said before, you know, this really abides by our principle that nothing about us without us. So we invite experts by experience, sector stakeholders and academics to submit an expression of interest to collaborate on this project. I'm going to be sharing the recruitment pack now for you. I am going to share my screen so that you can see what is involved. So I'm just sharing my screen, and I'm bringing up our recruitment page for our advisory group. I'm going to multitask and also get the link so you can see that externally if you would like to. So let me just get that for you. The link was shared yesterday in our slide resource pack. So I'm just going into the chat now. Here we go. And that's our recruitment pack for anyone who wants to have a look at that. So yes, our advisory group call to action, as I've said, who we are looking for and our criteria. We really want this to be authentically rooted in lived experience, which is why we want a majority panel of, board members who are, from have a lived experience of racial injustice in housing. The rest of the advisory group will be made up of housing charities, communities, academics and professionals. It's really clear that there needs to be a commitment to, housing justice and combating racism. This isn't about giving, Black and global majority people more, but it's really about meeting our communities at the intersection of inequalities. So what you'll do, you'll demand accountability. You will guide the research that reflects the needs of the community, and also in how we respond to what is needed, to be using your expertise. In the Slido, we've heard about capacity building, targeting community groups, of raising awareness, campaigning, housing rights advocacy. So it's all things like that that will go into this piece of work to ensure that it is relevant and it's appropriate. You will see here the key dates. We are kicking off our advisory group in March. We are planning to meet for every 6 weeks for 6 months. The time commitment is half a day. We will be remunerating lived experience and community members, and the deadline to apply is Thursday, the 20th of February. So if you're not already convinced in joining the movement, a little bit about ROTA, let me do a little bit of a sales pitch here. So we have been, at the forefront of tackling anti-racism for over the past 30 years. We are, committed to making a real impact and change. But again, knowing that we can't do this by ourselves, this is about coordinated action and using our resources and using our platform to advance our community. You will see there's a link there that asks you to click now to apply, and I'm clicking the link and it will take you to a really short form. In the form, it will ask you questions about, why is it that you would like to join us? What is your availability? And appreciating that some people might be doing this alongside your day job, so we also want to make it accessible. So would we want to meet in the evenings, for example? Would we want to meet in person and online? So those are the types of questions that you can expect in the form. I know I've been talking quite a bit, so I'm just going to see if anybody is interested or anybody has any questions, anything that might need clarifying in relation to joining the advisory group. Feel free to put your hand up. Hello, Layla, please unmute.
Hi, thank you so much for this morning. Found it really, really inspiring, really helpful. I will pass on the information about the advisory recruitment to London Housing Panel members to see if there's anyone there that's interested. But also wanted to know how would people sort of keep in touch with what's happening as the work progresses if they're not wanting to volunteer to join the advisory group?
Amazing question. Thank you for that and for sharing the details. We will be collating a mailing list. There will be blogs. There will be, different forms of media. We have a web page. So yes, those that have signed up, if you have no objections and are happy, we can certainly share project updates. There will be more webinars. There will be roundtables. There will be lots of opportunities to get involved and to join the conversation. So yeah, for those on the call today, you will be added to a mailing list and kept informed of future events and progress of the project. Great, thank you so much. So just seeing if we've got any other questions, and that's fine because processing things, time to land. My email address is there. You're welcome to drop me a line. Silvana, would you like to come on in? If I've said it wrong, please correct me.
No, it's all good, thank you. Thanks for this morning, very informative. I think my main question is like at the end of 6 months, what is the expected outcome to be?
Amazing, absolutely. And our expected outcome, we are going for funding, you know, so that's what we're doing at this moment in time. So whilst we have funding for 12 months, this is a larger program of work where we have a project plan for 5 years is what we believe it will take to do the research. So we are working with funders, you know, we are exploring funding options. We don't see this as ending at the end of the 6 months, but to get certain things across the line to go into our next phase. So in this planning year, for the funder that we're funded by, we have a number of objectives to meet, but certainly this is a priority that's not going anywhere. You know, we are seeking continuation funding to continue the work so that we can roll out the program of work to build the capacity and to respond to the evolving needs that we'll see. So we certainly see this, you know, extending.
Amazing.
Thank you. If that clarifies, great, thank you. And no problem, Paris, I think you said you've got to drop off, but yes, thank you so much for joining us, Paris. And Georgia, that's a great question. Yes, absolutely. There is lots of good practice happening across the country, and we'd be delighted to kind of hear about that. So yeah, feel free to share with networks, or again, drop me a line. My contact details are on our webpage. I'm just conscious, has anybody else got their hand up? Let's just have a look. No. Okay, great. So that's the advisory group, call to action and expression of interest forms. Let me just see. And as I say, timeline. So just again, going back to the timeline, we are encouraging responses by Thursday the 20th, and we are looking to notify candidates by the 27th, and there'll be a meeting schedule then based on everybody's availability, hybrid timings, you know, so that we can kind of plan ahead and look ahead. Okay, so if there's no further questions for me, I'm really excited to kind of go back to our slides and get ready to introduce my awesome colleague who works alongside me, Eleanor Stokes, who is our education policy researcher. And Eleanor is a social scientist specialising in research methods and education policy. Her work with ROTA addresses inequalities and discrimination in the UK and education and higher education systems. Over to you, Eleanor.
Thank you, Michaela, for that introduction. And thank you, everybody. I mean, so much ground has been covered today. My mind is buzzing. As Michaela said, I'm an education policy researcher with a particular interest in how insecure housing and homelessness affects the education of children and young people. But I've also been monitoring the progress of the government's Renters' Rights Bill, which is what I'm going to briefly go through today. So, gosh, our concerns about the bill are that although people from Black and Global Majority and Gypsy, Roma and Traveller communities, let alone refugees and asylum seekers, experience more housing insecurity and homelessness, the bill in its first stages of going through the Commons and the Lords didn't address race discrimination in any way. So, what is the Renters' Rights Bill? According to the government's guide, the Renters' Rights Bill commits to transforming the experience of private renting, including by ending Section 21 no-fault evictions. It also aims to give renters much greater security and stability so that they can stay in their homes for longer, build lives in their communities, and avoid the risk of homelessness. So that's what the government has to say about the bill. So who is the Renters' Rights Bill for? Well, on the one hand, the bill seeks to protect tenants from unfair or discriminatory practices. But on the other hand, the bill advises private landlords and housing providers on their legal obligations and how they can carry these out to provide safe, secure, and decent homes. Okay, so some of the aspects of the bill, according to the Renters' Right Impact Assessment, which was carried out in November 2024, covers things like tenants will be allowed to challenge rent rises and landlords only allowed to raise the rent once a year at market rate. Tenants can take disputes to a new ombudsman service, which will provide advice on legalities or other issues. Landlords are required to submit property standard details to a new database, which it's anticipated would help to reduce landlords acting illegally. Tenants with pets couldn't be refused unreasonably. Other benefits as well: better clarity on the legal obligations of landlords, better professionalism, a reduction in rogue landlords, stronger communities. Yeah, I mean, it's a very ambitious bill if you read it like that. So what is being done to ensure that the bill addresses race discrimination in housing? Well, yeah, the first draft of the bill made it illegal for landlords to discriminate against people who are in receipt of benefits and people with children, rightly so. But there were no specific provisions made for race discrimination. So what did we do? ROTA made written submissions to the Renters' Rights Impact Assessment Team, to all the APPGs and select committees with an interest in equality or discrimination and housing. And as the bill passed from the Commons to the Lords, we approached 10 members of the Lords. Now, okay, so we can now report that at the second reading in the Lords on the 4th of February, several of our concerns were raised by members. So this is good news. Those concerns that were raised were that race discrimination must be more specifically addressed. Other groups, apart from those in receipt of benefits and those who have children, should be included. Asylum seekers, refugees, Black and minoritized women were mentioned specifically. That the decent home standard should be extended to temporary and asylum accommodation, which it isn't currently. Goodness only knows why not. That's never happened. And measures to combat race discrimination should be rigorously enforced. So we've made some progress with that. Where do we go next? Well, I think that Michaela has outlined a lot of ways that ROTA is going to, where we are going to go next with this, including the project, which is going to rely very heavily upon lived experience of people contributing. We want to know who is missing from the housing debate, whose voices are not being heard. And just something which doesn't come up that often, but I think is important for us to address, is whether discrimination affects people working in the housing sector or in housing support. Have people come up against discriminatory practices or attitudes that hamper their work? And those are, I think, are the questions that we will be looking at, in addition to the areas that Michaela has already outlined. Yeah, we want to know where we go next, especially with policy influencing and how we can make sure that the voices are heard informing policy, not just in the Renters' Rights Bill, but in all sorts of other areas affecting housing, with human rights, with the law, with legislation in other areas as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eleanor. And I know that we are really cutting it fine to the line for time. And where we go next is a great question. I know there's a few policy people on the call. It would be great if we could connect and discuss that further. And I'm just going to quickly hand over to Ali, our chair, who'll bring our webinar to a close today. Thank you so much, Eleanor.
Thank you.
Wow, how time really flies. And I can't believe we're already at the end. And thank you very much all for attending again and for your contribution. I think we extracted quite a lot of information that will definitely feed into the planning of this project as we move it forward. And just to reiterate what Michaela described earlier, this is just phase 1 of planning, and we will be seeking further funding and will sustain this program and in the long run with multiple kind of inputs from various people, particularly those with lived experience of bad housing. Just to also reiterate, the reason we're doing that, it's not just because it's harming our communities and our people, but it's harming society at large. It's systemic, and to deal with systemic change, we need to kind of work in multiple channels with multiple stakeholders. And that's really the essence of how ROTA approaches all its work. So thank you for all your input today. And as Michaela said, all of this will be kind of shared back with you. We will have regular updates where we are with the program, and those who join us formally on the steering group will really shape not just the planning year, but going beyond and the year one and for the 5-year plus provision. And in terms of for those of you who are not members, can I just ask you just to join us, please? And there is a link, and that's the best way to get kind of not just get information about this, but generally get plugged into our wider work beyond the housing, and particularly now that we have the CEO in post and who will be taking the organization forward. And for us, without contribution of our members, our community, and really our work is hampered and will never be achieving as much as we want. We want to keep working with people, and because we believe actually together we can affect change and demand change, and from policymakers, from government, and those who hold position of power. And I'm not sure whether I'm missing anything else, and Michaela, but yeah, thank you very much again. And Matt, do you want to say final bye?
Yeah, I'm hoping that. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. No, just thank you to everyone again for your valuable and rich input. This is again just the start of the conversation, and as Ali said, as Michaela said, you know, this is about collaboration. This is about building power between organizations with communities as well to address this big issue. So yeah, really looking forward to working with you all. And yeah, it was a fantastic webinar. I mean, time really did fly by, didn't it, with this? So yeah, thank you to everyone.
Thank you.